How long have you lived with type 1 diabetes, Ray?
Right, I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 25 years, which was considerable length of time, so I was in my early 30s when I developed it.
Can you describe your problems with hypo unawareness?
Yeah, my hypo unawareness was probably worse over the last 5 years of having diabetes. It was quite devastating because although it started and it wasn't too bad, it gradually got worse, and it was really to the point where I would be unconscious sometimes over that, and these were happening at various times, so it affected my family life, my social life, my working life, because obviously when somebody is aware and they're talking to you and then the next minute you can be totally unconscious, that was very worrying for both me and for the people that observe that.
How did you hear about the opportunity for an islet cell transplant?
The opportunity for having a islet cell transplant came about through my local consultant. I'd been with him for about 11 years and he'd heard about Professor Johnson's work with islet cell transplants, and he felt that I might be a suitable candidate for the programme, and he'd said that he would write to Professor Johnson to see if it was possible that I could be interviewed to see if there was any possibility of being a suitable candidate, because he felt that it would improve my life considerably. So that was how I had heard about it.
When did you receive your first transplant and how was it carried out?
My first transplant was in February of 2010, and that was done at the Churchill Hospital. I had got a lot of trepidation about whether it would actually achieve the aim of me getting back my hypo unawareness. I was awake during the operation, and so that was a little bit frightening, but nevertheless it did all go very smoothly, and so you know, it certainly wasn't as bad as I'd expected it to be, and so I was looking forward to it with great hope, but certainly some trepidation.
How long did it take for the infusion to start working?
The infusion started working by the second week after I'd actually had the transplant. I didn't have any hypos while I was actually in hospital, so it was difficult to test that, although my insulin requirements were halved by the time at the end of the first week of insulin, so obviously that had been a positive. But in terms of hypo awareness, they were back within the second week of me having the islet cell transplant. So that was a very quick response to obviously the transplant. So I felt very, very positive about the fact that it had achieved or started to achieve what the aims of it were.
What difference did the transplant make to your diabetes control, and did you have to continue to inject insulin?
Right. The transplant made a significant difference to my diabetes control. In terms of insulin, I was still obviously on insulin, but my insulin requirements actually were cut to almost half of the dose that I was actually taking prior to the transplant. And then the other significant difference it made was the fact that by the second week I had got the signs of hypo-awareness that had actually returned prior to the transplant. So that was a very positive, and for me certainly a very hopeful response to the transplant, and obviously gave me some very hard evidence and proof that the transplant was beginning to work. And obviously, in fact, after the transplant, I didn't have any more periods of unconsciousness, because the hypo-awareness was so good that it never actually returned that level of going to be unconscious. So it was totally almost what I would describe as a transformation in terms of my diabetes control. And obviously, because I was on significantly lower doses of insulin, it made a difference overall to my diabetes control as well.
Have you had any subsequent infusions?
Yes. I received in October of the same year, so that was in 2010, a second transplant. And the main reason I think for that was that my understanding is that most recipients do have 2, sometimes 3 infusions, and it was felt that it would significantly even further give me more improvement. And so that was carried out in the October of the same year, and subsequently, as a result of that second transfusion, I actually came off insulin within 2 months of that, and have remained insulin free for the last 7 years. So that was an even better than expected result from the transplant.
Are there any side effects of an islet cell transplant?
Yes, there are side effects to the transplant, and these were pointed out to me prior to me receiving the transplant. So they were very, very open and honest at Oxford about some of the side effects that I would experience from this. Mainly, these were to do with taking immune suppression so that the transplant wouldn't reject. And so I was put on immune suppression just prior to the actual infusion taking place, and then after the transplant I've taken immune suppression every day since that. Unfortunately, one of the side effects has been that last year I did develop kidney failure. However, this wasn't only due to the immune suppression, it was due to multifactorial parts of my general health, having had diabetes for 25 years, the immune suppression and 1 or 2 other problems. I did develop some gastric problems, and I did develop some haematological problems, but I had visited Oxford on a regular basis. Most of these problems have been addressed and are constantly under review, and I am actually on dialysis for my kidney failure now. But as I said, that was probably the most significant of the side effects of it. But as I said, it wasn't just totally down to the transplant.
So what difference has the transplant made to you over the last 7 years?
The transplant's made a huge difference. As I said, I would have said it's been a transformation over the 7 years in the way that I've been able to live my life in all aspects, both in, as I said, family life, social life, friends, also the way that it's affected all of them, because previous to that transplant I think everybody was quite worried about whether I was going to be unconscious or not. Now they're quite happy. I've been able to drive again after the transplant, so I got my licence back. In actual fact, there are too numerous things to even mention. I couldn't really have wished for any better outcome than receiving. I just feel very fortunate and very lucky to have been given the chance to have had this treatment. My only hope is that others can share in this, and it can be worked on where in the future maybe the immune suppression doesn't need to be given to make things even better. But yes, it's made a huge difference. and I would definitely go through it again if I had to. Highly recommend it.